Every time her wheels crushed the wheat, my heart sank. Not because of the loss of value, but because of the brazen arrogance displayed in broad daylight. That's a word of permission, not a single hesitant glance. She drove her brazen white SUV through my rice field like a slap in the face, as if this land was created solely for her convenience. She acted not like a neighbor, but like a landowner treating my family's heritage as a wasteland to be. The way her wheels crushed each stalk of rice, each vein of soil was like a declaration. I have the right, and you are just the one who should know your place and keep quiet. And when I put an end to that arrogance, her reaction was not regret, but anger, as if I were the one who had trespassed. But I was no longer going to be patient. If she wants to play power games, then I'm ready for the final game, right in the middle of my ancestors' rice fields. My name is Jake Sullivan, and I inherited this 40-acre wheat farm on the outskirts of Millbrook Heights after my grandfather passed last spring. Most folks around here know me as the quiet guy who keeps to himself, tends his crops, and occasionally helps neighbors with their livestock problems. What they don't know is something I prefer to keep private for now. Linda Morrison moved into the Millbrook Heights HOA community 2 years ago and quickly clawed her way to HO. She's the type of woman who measures her neighbor's grass with a ruler and calls code enforcement if your mailbox is the wrong shade of beige. Her husband Tom seems like a decent man, but he's learned to stay quiet when Linda's on the warpath. The question was, how far would she push before I pushed back? The trouble started innocently enough when Linda noticed my wheat field bordered her precious subdivision. During her first HOA meeting after spotting my farm, she declared my unsightly agricultural eyesore was damaging property values. Never mind that my family had been farming this land since 1923, decades before her McMansion neighborhood existed. Initially, she tried the diplomatic approach. Linda knocked on my door with a plate of store-bought cookies and a folder full of real estate listings, suggesting I sell to developers. When I politely declined, explaining the farm held sentimental value, her smile turned arctic. "Well, we'll just have to see about that," she said, gathering her papers with sharp, angry movements. The first violation notice arrived 3 days later. According to Linda's interpretation of county codes, my split-rail fence was deteriorating and unsightly. Never mind that the weathered cedar had stood strong for 30 years. The second notice came that Friday, claiming my grain storage silo violated HOA aesthetic guidelines. But Linda's real weapon was the shortcut. Instead of driving the extra 4 mile around the bend to reach the main road, she began cutting through my wheat field daily. Her morning commute carved a muddy path through the northwest corner, destroying hundreds of dollars worth of crop. When I confronted her, she claimed it was a historic easement, though she couldn't produce any documentation. The situation escalated when Linda organized a community safety meeting about my negligent farming practices. She stood before 20 neighbors in the community center, pointing to blown-up photos of my perfectly normal farm equipment, declaring it a danger to children and property values. She'd even hired a lawyer to research nuisance abatement procedures, clearly intending to force me out through legal intimidation. Her crowning achievement was recruiting the county inspector's office. Somehow Linda convinced them to conduct surprise inspections of my operation every 2 weeks. Each visit required hours of paperwork and disrupted my daily routine, though they never found actual violations. The inspector, clearly annoyed at being weaponized for personal vendettas, began dropping hints about frivolous complaints and misuse of county resources. Meanwhile, Linda's SUV continued its daily destruction through my wheat field. She'd upgraded from sneaking through at dawn to brazenly driving through at rush hour, sometimes honking, if she encountered my farm equipment in her path. The damaged crops represented more than lost income. They symbolized everything wrong with entitled suburban sprawl, consuming family farms. The breaking point came during the annual Millbrook Heights Community Barbecue. Linda stood on the pavilion stage, microphone in hand, describing her vision for neighborhood improvement. Her PowerPoint presentation included satellite photos of my farm with red arrows pointing to problem areas. She proposed organizing a petition to force the county to condemn my property under eminent domain, claiming my farming operation posed environmental hazard. What Linda didn't realize was that her systematic campaign had awakened something in me that had been dormant since my early retirement, 20 years of experience had taught me to recognize coordinated harassment campaigns. And Linda wasn't just being difficult. She was systematically attempting to destroy my livelihood, using regulations, intimidation, and social pressure. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She assumed I was just another simple farmer who'd fold under legal threat. The truth was, I'd spent 15 years as a USDA agricultural inspector before retiring to this farm. And I understood agricultural law, environmental regulations, and bureaucratic warfare better than most attorneys. As I watched Linda's PowerPoint presentation paint my family's century-old farm as a community menace, I felt something shift inside me. My grandfather hadn't held on to this land through the Depression, World War II, and countless economic downturns just to watch it die under the wheels of Linda Morrison's SUV. My first move was pure agricultural inspector methodology. Comprehensive documentation. I installed trail cameras along the fence line to record Linda's daily trespassing, each time-stamped video showing clear property destruction. More importantly, I began photographing everything in Linda's neighborhood with the trained eye of someone who'd spent 15 years finding violations, hiding in plain sight. The Millbrook Heights HOA had dozens of rules, but Linda's enforcement had always been selective. Her own property, however, told a different story. The decorative fountain in her front yard exceeded HOA height restrictions by 8 inches. Her recently installed pergola violated setback requirements by 3 feet. Most damning, the husband Tom's workshop shed had been built without proper permits, a discovery I made through my old contacts at the county planning office. But these minor infractions were nothing compared to what I found in the HOA's own records. Linda had been sloppy with her power, leaving a paper trail of procedural violations, improper meeting notifications, and financial irregularities. As someone who'd investigate agricultural cooperatives for years, I recognized the signs of an organization being run like a personal thief rather than a legal entity. My breakthrough came through an unexpected ally, Tom Morrison himself. While Linda escalated her warfare against my farm, Tom had grown increasingly uncomfortable with his wife's obsession. During a chance encounter at the feed store, he quietly mentioned that Linda's daily shortcuts were damaging his truck's alignment and that he'd suggested she use the actual road. When I showed him the trail camera footage of crop damage, Tom's expression shifted from embarrassment to genuine anger. "I told her to stop that nonsense weeks ago," he muttered, watching his wife's SUV plow through another section of wheat. "She said it was her right because she was HOA president." Tom agreed to testify about Linda's trespassing if needed, revealing that she'd been collecting research on my property for months, convinced she could find legal grounds for forced removal. Armed with documentation and an insider witness, I scheduled a meeting with my former colleague at the County Agricultural Extension Office. Sarah Chen had worked alongside me for 8 years and understood the delicate balance between residential development and agricultural preservation. When I showed her Linda's systematic campaign against my farm, Sarah's response was immediate and professional. "This is clear agricultural harassment," she said, reviewing the evidence. "We have specific protections for established farming operations, especially century farms like yours. What she's doing isn't just wrong, it's potentially criminal." Sarah connected me with the county's agricultural ombudsman, a position specifically created to protect farmers from residential encroachment issues. Within hours, I had access to legal resources that dwarfed anything Linda could afford through the HOA budget. But my ace in the hole was Goliath, my grandfather's prize. Angus bull who had been peacefully grazing in the back pasture since spring. Most people assumed he was just livestock, but Goliath had earned his name through sheer protective instinct. My grandfather had trained him to guard the property boundaries, and the massive bull had an uncanny ability to detect intruders. The interior fencing that had kept Goliath separated from the wheat field was old and needed replacement anyway. Removing it would give him access to the entire northwestern section, exactly where Linda's daily shortcuts occur. I spent 3 days carefully removing fence sections, while Goliath watched with intelligent brown eyes. He seemed to understand that his territory was expanding, and something in his posture suggested he approved. The final section came down on a Thursday evening, just as Linda's white SUV carved its familiar path. I positioned myself with coffee and binoculars near the kitchen window, watching as Linda's SUV approached the field entrance at exactly 7:23 a.m., her usual schedule. The wheat stalks parted as she accelerated along her self-made path, completely oblivious to the 12,200-pound surprise. Waiting in the morning mist, Goliath emerged from behind the grain storage silo like something from a nature documentary, his massive frame silhouetted against the sunrise. Linda's SUV came to an abrupt halt as she registered the enormous bowl standing directly in her path, steam rising from his nostrils in the cool morning air. For 30 seconds, woman and beast engaged in a staring contest that would determine the future of their shared battlefield. Then Goliath took 3 deliberate steps forward, lowering his head with unmistakable intent. Linda's SUV reversed so quickly it nearly landed in the drainage ditch, her tires spinning frantically as she retreated to the safety of the actual road. From my kitchen window, I could see her gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles, her face a mask of shock and outrage. But this was only the opening move in a much larger game, and Linda Morrison had no idea how many pieces I still had left to play. Linda's response to the Goliath encounter was predictably explosive. Within hours, my phone buzzed with calls from County Animal Control, the Sheriff's Department, and the Agricultural Extension Office. She'd filed complaints, claiming I was harboring a dangerous animal and creating public safety hazards. Each caller, however, seemed more amused than concerned after hearing my credentials and reviewing the situation. Ma'am, cattle grazing on private agricultural property isn't a crime, the sheriff's deputy explained to Linda during his courtesy visit. Actually blocking someone's livestock access could constitute interference with agricultural operations, which carries serious penalties. But Linda's real mistake was calling an emergency HOA meeting for that Saturday, demanding immediate action against the agricultural menace threatening our community. She'd sent inflammatory emails to every resident describing my farm as a clear and present danger and promising to unveil shocking evidence of safety violations. Saturday arrived with perfect autumn weather, and Linda had transformed the community center into her personal courtroom. She'd arranged chairs in formal rows facing a presentation screen, complete with a podium and microphone system. Printed packets labeled agricultural safety concerns waited on every seat, filled with blown-up photos of my perfectly normal farm equipment and livestock. 23 residents attended, including several I'd helped over the years with animal problems. Tom Morrison sat in the back row, his expression carefully neutral, but his body language suggesting deep discomfort. Linda commanded the podium like a prosecutor delivering opening statements. "Friends and neighbors," she began, her voice amplified through the crackling sound system. "We face an unprecedented threat to our community's safety and property values. This morning, I was personally attacked by a dangerous bull while using a historic easement to reach the main road." She clicked through her PowerPoint presentation showing photos of Goliath from various angles, each image captioned with inflammatory descriptions like aggressive bovine threat and uncontrolled livestock danger. The presentation included property value statistics, insurance liability charts, and legal precedents for nuisance abatement procedures. "I've consulted with agricultural attorneys," Linda continued, "and we have grounds to petition the county for immediate intervention. This farm operation clearly violates modern safety standards and poses ongoing risk to our children and property." Several residents shifted uncomfortably as Linda's presentation grew increasingly dramatic. She'd prepared a formal petition demanding county investigation, complete with signature lines and legal language. The document called for immediate livestock containment measures and comprehensive agricultural safety compliance review. Furthermore, Linda announced, reaching her climax, "I have documentation proving this property owner has engaged in deliberate intimidation tactics, including strategic placement of dangerous animals to threaten law-abiding citizens exercising their legal rights." That's when I stood up from my seat in the back corner, where I'd been quietly taking notes on a yellow legal pad. The room turned as one recognizing me for the first time. Linda's confident expression flickered as she realized her target had been present for her entire presentation. "Thank you for the opportunity to respond," I said calmly, walking to the front of the room. "I'm Jake Sullivan, and I'd like to address some factual errors in Mrs. Morrison's presentation." I'd brought my own materials, a folder containing 15 years' worth of agricultural inspection credentials, county correspondence, and legal documentation. But my first exhibit was simpler, a surveyor's map showing precise property boundaries. Mrs. Morrison refers to a historic easement through my wheat field, I said, spreading the map across Linda's presentation table. However, county records show no such easement has ever existed. What she's describing is actually criminal trespassing and crop destruction, documented over 6 weeks through trail camera footage. The room buzzed as I connected my laptop to Linda's projection system, replacing her PowerPoint with timestamp stamped videos of her FUV cutting through my wheat field. Each clip showed clear property damage with date stamps, proving systematic. I continued. I understand the difference between legitimate safety concerns and harassment campaigns designed to force established farming operations out of business. Mrs. Morrison's complaints represent the latter. Linda attempted to interrupt, but Tom Morrison's voice cut through the murmur. Linda, I told you to stop driving through his field weeks ago. This is embarrassing. The betrayal hit Linda like a physical blow, her face cycling through shock, anger, and humiliation. But I wasn't finished. My 15 years of bureaucratic warfare had taught me that the most effective counterattacks use the opponent's own weapons against them. Since Mrs. Morrison values regulatory compliance so highly, I said, producing a second folder, I've conducted my own investigation into HOA operations and found several concerning violations. I distributed photocopied documents showing Linda's procedural violations, improper meeting notifications, unauthorized expenditures, and selective enforcement patterns. The Codagra was a formal complaint I'd filed with the county ombudsman's office documenting agricultural harassment under state protection statutes. Mrs. Morrison's fountain exceeds HOA height restrictions, I continued methodically. Her pergola violates setback requirements. Her husband's workshop lacks proper permits. Most importantly, her systematic harassment of a protected agricultural operation violates state law and carries penalties including personal liability for crop damages. The room had fallen completely silent. Linda gripped the podium as if it were the only thing keeping her upright, her carefully constructed presentation crumbling under documented evidence and legal precedent. Furthermore, I added, Goliath is a registered Angus bull with proper livestock documentation, grazing on legally designated agricultural land. Any attempt to restrict his movement or interfere with normal farming operations would violate agricultural protection statutes. Sarah Chen from the County Extension Office chose that moment to enter the community center, having been invited as my expert witness. Her presence added official weight to everything I presented, and her brief testimony about agricultural harassment laws left no doubt about Linda's legal exposure. The meeting concluded with Linda's petition receiving 0 signatures and several residents apologizing for her behavior. Tom Morrison approached me afterward, offering to pay for crop damages and promising Linda's trespassing would end immediately. But the real victory was watching Linda Morrison's carefully constructed authority crumble in front of the very community she tried to turn against me. Her reign of bureaucratic terror had ended not through confrontation or legal battles, but through the simple application of truth documentation and the same regulatory precision she'd tried to weaponize. As residents filed out, many stopped to shake my hand and apologize for Linda's behavior. The community had witnessed firsthand how easily authority could be abused and how quickly that abuse could be exposed when someone fought back with knowledge, preparation, and unshakable evidence. The aftermath of Linda's failed community meeting created ripples that spread far beyond Millbrook Heights, and Tom Morrison proved to be a man of his word. Monday morning brought a certified check covering crop damages along with a handwritten note apologizing for his wife's behavior. More significantly, he had quietly provided county investigators with access to HOA financial records, revealing a pattern of unauthorized expenditures and questionable decision-making that extended far beyond her war against my farm. The agricultural ombudsman's investigation moved with bureaucratic efficiency that would have impressed my former USDA colleagues. Linda received official notice that her harassment campaign violated state agricultural protection statutes carrying potential penalties, including triple damages for crop destruction and personal liability for legal costs. The same regulatory framework she tried to weaponize against me now became the instrument of her downfall. But Linda's true reckoning came during the emergency HOA board meeting called by concerned residents. 27 homeowners packed the community center. many armed with documentation of Linda's selective enforcement and procedural violations. The meeting opened with a motion of no confidence, followed by demands for her immediate resignation as HOA president. Linda attempted one final grandstand, claiming she'd been protecting property values from agricultural encroachment, but her words fell on deaf ears. Too many residents had witnessed her public humiliation and reviewed the evidence of her systematic abuse of authority. When the vote came, she received support from exactly 0 board members. Tom Morrison, speaking publicly, for the first time in months announced he was filing for divorce and moving out of their shared home. His quiet dignity stood in stark contrast to Linda's increasingly frantic attempts to salvage her reputation. The man who'd endured years of her controlling behavior had finally found his voice, and his departure removed her last source of credible support. The county's investigation concluded with a damning report that resulted in formal charges against Linda for misuse of HOA funds in violation of agricultural protection statutes. Her legal bills quickly exceeded any savings from her harassment campaign, and the stress of defending multiple fronts took its toll on both her finances and her mental state. By Christmas, Linda Morrison had moved out of Millbrook Heights, entirely relocating to a distant suburb where her reputation couldn't follow. The house sold quickly to a young family who introduced themselves by bringing fresh-baked bread and expressing appreciation for living near authentic farmland. Their children loved watching Goliath graze peacefully in the wheat field, now protected by sturdy new fencing that clearly marked property boundaries. The HOA underwent complete reorganization under new leadership committed to transparency and fair enforcement. They implemented quarterly financial reports, mandatory notification procedures, and a conflict resolution process that prevented future abuse of authority. Several residents with agricultural backgrounds were elected to the board, ensuring policies would consider farming operations as community assets rather than threats. My relationship with the neighborhood transformed from antagonistic to collaborative. Residents began seeking my advice on livestock problems, organic gardening, and sustainable land management. The annual community barbecue now included a farmer's market section where I sold fresh produce and honey from beehives I'd added along the southern border. Tom Morrison became an unexpected friend, often stopping by to help with farm projects and sharing stories about his restoration of a vintage John Deere tractor. His knowledge of mechanical systems proved invaluable during harvest season, and our friendship became a symbol of healing within the community. The County Agricultural Extension Office used my case as a model for agricultural protection advocacy, inviting me to speak at conferences about defending established farming operations against residential encroachment. My experience as both USDA inspector and harassment victim provided unique insights into the regulatory tools available for protecting family farms. Goliath, meanwhile, became something of a local celebrity. Children from the neighborhood often visited with their parents to observe the massive bull who'd become a symbol of agricultural resilience. I installed an educational sign near the fence explaining Angus cattle history and sustainable farming practices, turning Linda's former shortcut into an impromptu learning center. The wheat field flourished under improved management practices and freedom from daily vehicle damage. My harvest that fall exceeded expectations, providing enough grain to supply several local bakeries with heritage wheat flour. The economic success validated my grandfather's belief that the land would provide for those who respected its natural cycles. On the anniversary of Linda's failed community meeting, I stood in the same wheat field where her SUV had once carved its destructive path. Golden stalks swayed in the autumn breeze unmarked by tire tracks or bureaucratic warfare. Goliath grazed peacefully nearby his presence, a reminder that sometimes the best defense against bullies is simply standing your ground with unshakable confidence. A final piece of my victory came in the form of a formal letter from the county commissioners officially designating my property as a Century Farm under state agricultural heritage protection. The designation carried both ceremonial value and legal weight, ensuring that future development pressures would face significant regulatory hurdles. I installed a new sign at the farm entrance: Sullivan Century Farm S. 1923 Protected Agricultural Heritage Site. Below it, a smaller plaque read, Goliath on Duty, Agricultural Operations in Progress. A sign served both as historical markers and gentle warnings to anyone considering unauthorized shortcuts through my property. As I watched the sunset paint the wheat field gold, I thought about my grandfather's legacy and the lessons learned from defending it. Sometimes justice comes not through confrontation or legal battles, but through patient preparation, careful documentation, and the simple refusal to be intimidated by bullies who mistake authority for power. Linda Morrison had tried to use bureaucracy as a weapon against my family's century-old farm. Instead, she discovered that true power comes not from titles or positions, but from knowledge, integrity, and the courage to stand up for what's right. My wheat field would continue growing long after her suburban empire had crumbled, protected by both the law and a 12,200-pound guardian who never forgot his duty. The small person had indeed won over the powerful, not through luck or circumstance, but through preparation, patience, and the unbreakable determination to protect what matters most.